The 2024 Polyglot Gathering is brought to you by Glossica.
One, two. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Will take place a talk, but nobody can teach you a language. With Dario, born German, but Estonian by in his heart. As usual, we will take question at the end with the Slido, so you can scan the QR code and you can ask question or upvote the most interesting question. And I will leave the mic to Dario.
Hello. Actually, let's start with a question. Can you please raise your hand if you're currently actively learning a language? Okay, that's not everyone. I'm surprised. Can you raise your hand if you are teaching a language? That is almost everyone. So good. So today I'm going to talk about nobody can teach you a language. And if you only have 1 minute or you find this excruciatingly boring, this is the one thing I want you to take away from today. And this is what we're going to expand on soon. Nobody can teach you a language. You can only learn a language. So you can go now. That's the talk. Before, why am I here? Why am I talking about this? So I live in Tallinn in Estonia. If you've never seen Estonia on a map before, that's Tallinn, and Finland to the north and Russia to the east. And I rarely leave Tallinn, but I made it here today. So why Tallinn? Well, Tallinn is beautiful. It's my home for almost 10 years now. What's special about Tallinn is we get about 3,000 people every year moving to Tallinn, mostly for tech jobs in one of these two companies. There are more companies in Estonia, but these are the biggest ones. Maybe some of you have used both of their services. Fun fact, I work at Bolt currently, and the Wise office is right next to the Bolt office, so we can look at each other through the windows and wave, and we send each other birthday messages by putting post-its on the windows. It's quite funny because these are huge companies, but Tallinn is a small city. So we get 3,000 people on average, and we lose about 2,000 people on average every year. What does that mean? A lot of confused people, because we get new people who don't know yet that they want to learn Estonian, or find it difficult to learn Estonian, or think it's pointless to learn Estonian. And we get 2,000 people every year who got frustrated enough with Estonian and Estonia to leave the country. So Estonia is known for its open and friendly people, its beautiful summers, and the easy language. These are the 3 reasons why I moved there. It started with the language, and then I realized I like the weather, because when you're working in front of a computer, this is actually excellent weather. It's way nicer to be indoors with a computer when outside it looks like this, compared to what we had here a few days ago. And Estonians are actually nice. I encourage you to speak to Estonians. They're actually very open people. The only thing they will not do is take the first step to talk to you. But once you talk to them, you can actually talk about anything, which is really cool. So that's the background. In the year 2015, I learned that when I prepared my slides, Lithuania got the euro. It's also the year when I moved to Estonia and started teaching Estonian. Because, well, first of all, back then, nobody learned Estonian. That was really weird for people. And all the teachers were bad. I judge teachers being bad by the amount of frustrated students you see. There was a lot of them. And since I only had positive experiences with Estonian, I thought, maybe there is something to it. And 2023, so it's last year, Croatia got the euro. And it's also the year when I started focusing on language teaching and started setting up my business. So it's not an ad for my business, but I talk about this because I'm really passionate about teaching Estonian. Even have some former students of mine in the audience. And coincidentally, in the same year, another country got the euro. So, what do all of these three things have in common that you see on the slide? So what does exercise, nutrition, and bodily functions all have in common? They're natural. Yes, they're natural. They have another thing in common. And also, if you have questions or things, just shout. That's also cool. You don't need to wait for Slido. I see a question in the back. Yes, you have to do this regularly. That is one thing they have in common, especially the last one. You need to do that one regularly, but it's still not a conclusion I'm waiting for. Let's have one more try. What do all of these things have in common? Yes, nobody will do it for you. Correct. Like you have. Whoa. Okay, that's the talk. You can go. Yes, you have to do all of these things yourself. Nobody can exercise for you. Nobody can prepare a colorful salad for you. Well, actually, that's true, but nobody can eat the salad for you. And nobody can take care of your bodily functions for you. So that is all stuff you have to do yourself. And language learning is no different. Learning a language, practicing the skills of learning a language is essentially the same as physical exercise or nutrition or the other thing. So what are the consequences of this? Mindset. It changes your mindset. Because once you accept that nobody can do this for you, you will realize that the responsibility lies with you. Exactly. So that is very different from the responsibility being with other people. If you go to a restaurant, you order a salad, the responsibility for the salad being nice does not lie with you. It lies with the restaurant. In fact, you will hold the restaurant accountable if they don't bring you a salad or they give you a crappy salad. And you should hold the restaurant accountable. You know what most people are bad at? Holding themselves accountable. So what does it mean to have this mindset? It actually changes everything you do. If you take responsibility for your learning because nobody can do it for you or for any other skill, then it changes how you go about learning languages in every area. So instead of getting a textbook, so this is one of the most common textbooks in Estonia, in Eesti, takes you from the very beginning to like B1, allegedly, if you finish it. Raise your hand if you ever had a language textbook and thought, damn, this textbook is amazing. I love reading this textbook so much. Before I go to sleep, I read this textbook. Oh, I see. 2 hands, one and a half. Okay, great. Did you write that textbook? Okay. Madam, tell me what textbook it is after the talk. I'm curious, actually. But thank you. Yeah, so instead of reading textbooks, which are for learning, and again, place the responsibility for success on the person having written a textbook, you can actually read real books, books you care about. Most likely it's going to be really difficult in the beginning if you know literally nothing about a language. But, that's taking responsibility again. So all of these things, well, not all of them, but most of them are really difficult when you are just getting started. But eventually you'll get better at them. You'll make better salads, you'll do more pull-ups, all of these things, and you'll have an easier time translating books or reading books. You'll stop translating, you actually get to reading. It's not only about written things, it's also about how you challenge yourself. So I'm sure all of you have seen amazing exercises that get your pulse up, like the one on the left, fill in the blanks. It's so exciting, it's hard to contain the excitement. And alternatively, you can actually learn stuff you need. So I have a friend who is into photography, and most of his Estonian is actually learning about how to interact with the people working at this exact shop you're seeing on this picture. And he learns what he needs to learn to solve the challenge of interacting with these people. Coincidentally, the friend is also the same one who chose this book to translate. So a lot of inspiration there. And you all know this dialogue. Hello, how are you? Good, how are you? Also good. End of transaction. It's our favorite dialogue, and we all know it in all the languages we always learn. And why do we do this to ourselves? For real, like, why should this be the first thing you're learning? Because it's in a textbook, and it's preserved, and it's presented to you on a silver platter, and that's like an easy way to start. It's also an easy way to end every conversation, because that's usually where the conversation dies. It doesn't matter what language you're speaking. So you should be a bit more creative. And again, you can learn the things you actually care about. So if you're talking about photography, yeah, when are the films ready? Like when are they developed? That starts a more interesting conversation, and from there you can go and ask about, like, oh, what kinds of films do you have, and how long will it take, and better than this. Good. And then also for speaking. So what is speaking? By the way, does anybody know what these symbols are? Have you seen them before? Raise your hand if you have. 1, 2, 3. Okay, yeah, I know why you've seen them, Ben. Yeah, so basically, short aside, because then you get actually some more informational content as well. These are Bliss symbols invented by Charles Bliss in 1949, who wanted Chinese characters without the Chinese in it. Yeah, so it's basically, it is a language, like you can combine characters, but the idea is to express meaning in writing directly. There's no spoken language associated with it, which makes it a great placeholder thing on slides on a Polyglot conference. And for speaking, what you want to do is you have some idea, some meaning you want to express, and then you need to somehow render this in the language you're trying to learn or trying to use. You don't need a teacher for this. You can just do this yourself. But if you approach things differently, oh, here's this thing I want to express, then you can start working on actually expressing the things you care about. Which brings me to skills. You should look up the etymology of that word. It's actually quite interesting. But skills are amazing for a couple of reasons. Raise your hand if you have ever acquired a skill in your life. Yeah. Raise your hand if you've gotten better at that skill. Raise your hand if you believe you can acquire more skills. Great, amazing. So everybody knows why skills are great, because you can get new skills, you can get better at the skills you have, and it's like an open opportunity to just get better at things. So what are the skills for language? You need reading, writing, listening, and speaking. All of these skills are connected by one thing that makes it really difficult to practice all of these skills, and that's needing a vocabulary. So they have synergies, they help each other, but ultimately you need to tackle the vocabulary problem. That's the biggest problem to solve. Luckily, there's a lot of tools for that. Again, no teacher required. If you have a dictionary or a cool app. And the important thing about skills is the concept of specificity. That means to get better at making salads, you need to make salads. To get better at pull-ups, you need to do pull-ups. To get better at... So that's specificity. You need to practice all of these things individual. To get better at reading, you need to read. To get better at writing, you need to write. To get better at speaking, you need to speak. And to get better at listening, you need to listen. That's the price you pay for skills. Now, textbooks. What happens when you spend a lot of time on textbooks? You don't want to study anymore, yeah. You also get better at working with textbooks. If this is your goal, being the best learner with textbooks, sticking to textbooks is a great way to achieve this goal. Most people are not in that group and they don't want to get better at learning a language. They actually want to get better at using a language, but they're stuck with learning materials. You will become an excellent learner of a language if you stick to learning materials, but you're not going to be a good user of the language if you never use it. Now, the question is, why start with textbooks at all? I don't have an answer to this question. You have an answer to this question. Okay, so the answer was it's most efficient for teachers with large groups to give everybody a textbook. Yes, knowing the author of this textbook, that is exactly what is happening. Good. Practice. Yes, we talked about practice already, so you need to practice the thing you want to get better at. And how is practice different from just doing the thing? Like I see a bunch of coffee cups here. How is drinking coffee different from practicing the act of drinking coffee? Take a moment to think about it. Awareness, okay, but attention, awareness, yes, and you also had real purpose, exactly. So intentionality, purpose, attention, all of these things are really important. You focus your attention on the thing you want to practice. And in the case of coffee, you could actually make a case for you can practice drinking coffee by focusing on the taste, the texture. Maybe you try to discern different beans. You can actually practice drinking coffee. And the same is true for our 4 favorite skills. Now, practice starts with action. And when you execute that action, you get an effect. And then this effect, hopefully, makes you feel something. Like you open a textbook, that's the action. You go through an exercise, still part of the action. And then you get the effect. I want to close the textbook. Frustration. That's feedback. And there's 2 kinds of feedback. There is the negative feedback, which reinforces not repeating the behavior, which is obviously what we want when we're practicing a language. And there's positive feedback, which reinforces doing the behavior again. So this is a so-called feedback loop. It's a loop because it's closed, and it has feedback in it, which is what is closing the loop. So for practice, the thing that's really important is building feedback loops. All of you are participating in many, many feedback loops all the time. And if you have a feedback loop that is not great, you will hate doing all of these things. And that makes it really difficult to stick to them. But if you can find a way to turn the feedback into something positive, you actually want to do the thing more often. And that is the main challenge in language learning. Or not only in language learning, in any skill for that matter. So feedback loops. You need to build feedback loops. Has anybody here ever consciously designed a feedback loop in their life? Like thinking about it? 1 hand, 2 hands, 3 hands, 4 hands. Okay. It's a skill, building feedback loops for yourself, so you can practice that way. It's a specific skill. Luckily, it's also a generic skill, so you can apply it to anything. Question or comment? Yeah. So for example, my feedback loop while I'm here is I go to the same cafe every morning. I always place the same order, and I do it in Czech. Because I don't know Czech, but I can learn Czech. So the first day I came and said, okay, I ordered my coffee in Czech. I used not a textbook, but Google Translate to look up the sentence, and then made sure I understood everything I'm saying. I ordered my coffee. I got the coffee, but I also got questions, which I didn't understand. So we had the action, ordering the coffee in Czech. Effect, I get a coffee and questions. Feedback, wow, feels great. I managed to order a coffee in Czech. But I also got questions. So I stopped the barista and said, wait a second, what did you just tell me? And you'd think it's a super simple interaction, but literally every day I've gone to the same cafe, I get a different question. So things like, is that all? Or for here or takeaway. Actually, for here or takeaway took me such a long time to figure out, because when you look up here, you get zde, but people in the cafes say tady. So I heard nothing. Only heard the like or takeaway at the end. So what I do is I stop people, explain everything to me in great detail, because service people cannot run away. So so use that. Also, their jobs are not what you would call intellectually stimulating, so most of them really appreciate it. You come up with an interesting conversation. And then I feel good about it. And then the next day, I go place the same order, and then I get a question, and I prepared an answer maybe already. So I could handle the next question. And then I get my coffee, and I get to feel good because I got better at that skill. And I get another question. And on it goes. But today, one of the baristas at the Miners around the corner actually complimented me on my ability to order coffee in Czech. And he spoke English to me the whole time. But that's how I understood it was a compliment. Good. So if we want to build feedback loops, we need to have a model. If we don't, so a model is not the real world, because that's what we call the real world, but a simplified version of the real world that leaves out the unimportant details because we have too many details in the real world. And we need a model to build our feedback loops if we want to build feedback loops, but I hope by now you're convinced that you need a feedback loop. So once you have a model, oops, that was a bit too fast. Once you have a model, you can start asking interesting questions. And since I realized way too late that I promised to draw parallels between coding and language learning, I want to give you, who has some coding experience? Raise your hand. Oh, that's way more people than I expected. Good, but talking about a model, what does it mean to have a model? So you look at this code here, you see like, console log, hello world, and then you run it, and then it says hello world, and you could probably figure out that where the hello world is coming from by looking at the source code and looking at the output. So with for those of you who have some programming experience, I'm sorry for picking such a simple example, and for the rest, I hope to make it interesting. So the model bit here is you see a bunch of different things. They even have different colors. So you see this console thing, you see the log, you see parentheses, you see the quotation marks, and hello world is green for some reason. All of these things mean something. If you don't have a model of what these things mean, you look at this like, okay, if I want to get the computer to print some useless message somewhere, then this is how you do it. And next time I need to get the computer to do something, I go to Google or ChatGPT and ask like, hey, how do I tell the computer to do X? And you never learn anything. You just learn how to repeat things. It's the same with languages. This is the equivalent in engineering to just learning phrases by heart and not understanding what you're saying. It's just like, oh, for this problem, I have this canned solution. Now, for those who don't have a background in engineering or programming experience, what part do you think you need to change the message? Yeah, the green text, correct. You see the text, you just need to change the text. If you change it to goodbye, you get goodbye. Great. So what you just did is you built a little model in your head of how this thing is supposed to work. So you looked at what you see here, you formalized a hypothesis about what you need to change, you changed it, and then you observe the result. And you see, oh, your result matches your expectation. Great. Congratulations, you've just built a mental model of how coding works. You can do the same thing for languages. What makes coding really interesting is that you get feedback very, very, very fast. You can iterate through the same feedback loop many, many times. Models allow you to ask interesting questions. Like when we go back to our feedback loop, we had actions. Actions get you an effect, and the effect produces feedback. Once you start thinking in terms of models, you have questions like, what actions are there? Like you can literally list them out and look at it as if it was a computer game, where you're presented with different choices. You can do the same thing for your language learning. What are the actions I can take? And then once you have prepared the menu, have built your model of how this thing is supposed to work, you can choose actions that fit your current context. Maybe if you're tired and it's late at night and you're sitting at home, the action you don't want to take is go out to a bar and talk to people in my target language. Or maybe that's exactly when you want to take that action, I don't know. But it helps with removing friction from your learning process because you did all of the important thinking work already. Since we also had a little box titled effects on the slide, you can also ask the question like, oh, what are the effects I can observe? Like, I can get coffee, I can get questions, what are other things I can get? Because that allows you to build the map of your model, how it looks like. And once you have that, you can play with it, you can modify it. Just like we changed the text here from hello world to goodbye, that was playing with a model. And we can do the same for our feedback loop. We built a model of our feedback loop. Actions lead to effects. They give you feedback. And over time, you want to measure these things. If you don't measure them, you don't know whether you're going to improve or not. So you should measure how much time it takes you. Or you don't have to, but you could measure how much time it takes you. You can measure the intensity of the things you are performing, and you can measure the output. And ideally, you measure as many things as you can, as much as is practical, so you can track your progress over time. Applies to pull-ups, salads, and language learning. Good. Which brings me to the question, are teachers useless? Language teachers. Yes. As a language teacher, the answer is a resounding yes. Because we don't want to be teaching. I don't think teaching helps, but coaching does. The problem is coaching is hard to scale. So coaching is asking the right questions to get the person you're coaching to come up with their own answer that fits in their context. And, every feedback loop is different. Every output is different. But as a coach, you can help with the measuring part. You can make that easier. You can help your student, if we still want to call them that, with designing feedback loops that work for them. Again, the feedback loop is the important part. You can provide structure. Last time you picked up a new skill, I bet the hardest part was not actually performing the thing you wanted to get better at, but figuring out where to start, who to trust, what are good sources of information, are there even any sources of information? That's the thing teachers can provide. And of course, our favorite word starting with A, accountability. This is also one of the things that makes me think that AI is not going to be a problem because it's very easy to, not be accountable to yourself. And it's also very easy to not be accountable to a machine in your phone or whatever. The thing that works best for accountability is actually feeling very ashamed in front of another person because you didn't do your homework. And that is hard to replace. So, and ideally, as a good teacher, you inspire curiosity. You get your students to the point where they actively go and seek out the material that they want to be working with to solve a problem they're trying to solve. So to get back to that same friend who was reading Paulo Coelho's The Alchemist and developing films, he had issues with his residence permit in Estonia, had to go to the police and said, you know what? I don't want to show up there and say, hello, my problem is. And he actually wanted to make an effort and do a bit in Estonian. So we actually created a little intro for him, 4 or 5 sentences. He memorized it. He knew exactly what every word meant. And then he could go in there with confidence. The intro, then they started asking questions, as the police is wont to do. But the intro ended with, since this is an important topic to me, could we please speak in English about it? And this is not the stuff you find in a textbook, and this is stuff he found through self-directed learning with a teacher being there to support him. Good. I think we're at time. Perfect. Great. Now it's time for official questions, right? Okay, first question. You mentioned it's essential to measure the progress. It's okay to measure time, but how can you measure intensity and output? Intensity is easily measured by how painful is the act. How much are you pushing yourself out of your comfort zone? So if we compare it to exercise, how close do you get to failure? Like how close do you push yourself to failure? Salads, I don't know, like taste. Taste is a good proxy. Again, let's skip the last picture. And the other one was output. Output depends on what you're doing. Testing is a way, like quizzing yourself would be a way to measure output. Like how many words do you know? You learn that by testing yourself on like vocabulary quizzes, for example. Next question. What's your native language? How much it took to learn Estonian? My native language is fake Austrian, aka German. But I don't remember how much time it took me to learn Estonian because it happened a very long time ago. What my friends from that time told me was that it took me about 2 to 3 months to like keep a conversation going in Estonian, not make too many mistakes, but I spoke at the speed of a turtle walking. But I could keep the conversation going in Estonian, so that was good. And that was, I think, 2009 or something. So it's a long time ago. What else? Is measuring time really relevant? Then you have people saying, "I invested many years. Why can't I speak?" Well, time is one of the things you can measure. The point is, you should measure something and make that measure improve. You get to pick what you want to measure. If you invest many years and you still can't speak, my suspicion is you haven't practiced speaking. Because that one is hard to practice because it forces you to face your insecurities. And you need to be willing to make a fool out of yourself in front of other people, which is in general a very helpful skill in life. What do you think about sharing responsibility by getting a language partner? Yeah, why not? I mean, language partners can help you with setting up feedback loops. They can provide you with opportunities for practice. Yes, is what I think of it. How motivated do you need to be to build your own feedback loop? How do you keep up the motivation? How motivated do you need to be to drink coffee in the morning? How do you keep up the motivation? Usually when you don't have a feedback loop in place, the thing that motivates you is it going to be pleasure or pain? Pain. Pain motivates you to make changes in your life to attain pleasure. So the idea is to come up with a feedback loop that ends with something nice. You can be very creative with that. If you like eating ice cream, say, I eat ice cream every day, but only after I have performed a specific action. Boom, you have a pleasurable feedback loop. What's the next one? You mentioned teaching is not effective, but coaching is. How is it different, and how do you coach people? Teaching means transferring knowledge usually by speaking, like I'm doing here. I'm saying like, hey, this is a thing, you should do this thing, this is how the thing works, very boring. Let's do something else. That is teaching. Coaching is, tell me more about your problem. Oh, that's interesting. What is your biggest challenge at the moment? Oh, why do you think you have that challenge? What have you tried to overcome that challenge? Why can't you do the things you just told me that you want to do to overcome your challenge? It's basically just asking the right questions so people find their own answers, because everybody is the expert at living their own lives. So that's the only way. Like, you're the expert at being you. So all of the solutions you come up with, they need to work for you. And I can't be the expert at doing that. So that's how I would characterize coaching. If we only use the language, what's up with grammar mess? So I am a grammar first person because I really need to understand what's going on before I'm comfortable with using something. So if you are the same type of person, now we're coming back to being an expert at being yourself, then just start with the grammar. Make sure you have a concept of how the language works, so that you can make more sense of how how things relate to each other and that you can store the information in the right place in your brain. And then what was the rest? If we only use the language. So my experience with people quitting Estonian is because Estonian is taught like that. Oh, let's only use Estonian. And unless you speak Finnish, Hungarian, or Turkish, nothing will make sense because the model of the language is very different from what you're used to. And then you don't make sense of the grammar mess. Like you can see this over and over and over again. And a way to think about it is you can look at all of the examples and you can try to figure out the rules on your own. Like imagine you're dropped into a game and you don't know the rules of the game, but you still need to play because everybody around you is interacting with you and playing that game. You can observe what other people are doing and try to figure out the rules. Or you could just read the rule book and then maybe get really good at playing the game because you actually know how it works. So that's my take on grammar. Surata, how do you suggest to help students understand that effort needs to come internally, ultimately are the only people accountable for their success? Talks like this, I don't know, just help people more, talk more about it. This is like, if you manage to solve this problem in general, then you will be a very rich person because it's what every person on earth is struggling with. So, I guess it's a skill you can practice. Yeah, question from the audience. Yeah, so input from the audience, it's the fault of our educational system, which teaches us to lay back and relax and take in information instead of making sense of things on our own. Why fake Italian and fake Austrian? Where do you come from? I come from Germany, and I say fake Italian and fake German because that's my sense of humor. What would you do differently if you were to learn a new language now? Speak more, basically. Like take the most uncomfortable part, which is speaking, because you need other people, you need to be in specific places. You need to do it in real time. You need to be comfortable with blanking when it counts. So if you get good at that, then the rest is comparatively easy. Next question. What patterns, common responses did you notice in the 100 plus students you have supported with their language journeys? I don't understand how Estonian works. Nobody has explained to me how it works. I don't want to talk about simple things like the apple is red and on the table anymore. I want to talk about things I actually care about. Our teacher refuses to explain things, which is a very, very common thing in Estonia. I don't know exactly why. I talked to one teacher once and she said, you have a group of 30 people. 3 of them understand what's going on and they have a question. So I could spend 5 minutes out of 45 to explain in great detail how this thing works to 3 people, losing the other 27 people. Or I can just tell these 3 very motivated people, it is like this because it is like this, and not drop the rest of the class. And most teachers choose to prioritize the need of the many versus the need of the few, which is very, very frustrating if you're actually motivated because every time you have a question, you don't get an answer, which is a feedback loop that teaches you to not ask questions. Negative feedback. I agree with you a lot, but how can this view of learning be made more common? The textbook approach is almost universal in Czech courses here in Prague. Marketing, again, just lead by example, do more of it, tell people about it. That's unfortunately how it works. Another way to look at it is a great business opportunity. So you can take a different approach to what everybody else is doing. And then you have people who want your services and not other services. If not learning grammar from the textbooks, then what do you recommend? What do you use? Well, I usually go to Wikipedia and look at how the language is structured because it's like I have a foundation of grammar knowledge. I know cases, genders, participles, adverbs. I know what all of these things are. So usually when I start a language, I just get a view of the landscape. What are there cases? If yes, what cases are there? Are there genders? Are there participles? all of these things. Just like my goal is to get very quickly to the point where when I look at a language, I understand what kind of word I'm looking at, just so that I can store it in the right place in my brain. And once I know what kind of word it is, I can also start playing with it. Oh, it's a verb. Great. Let me try to put the verb into the past tense or like second person plural or whatever, just to play around with it. But if I don't know this, I cannot do any of these things, which brings me back to models. If you don't have a model, you just learn the phrases and repeat the phrases, then you're stuck with the phrases. I want to learn German from zero. Where do I start? You go to David, who's sitting in the audience here. Linguator Fluency. He is American, but I did not know until he told me, because he fooled me 110%. So this is the starting point I can recommend. What do you like the most about Estonia? The language, the weather, and the people. Like for real. I wasn't kidding earlier. While Estonians leave you alone, they're also very happy when you talk to them. And since Estonia doesn't have a glorious past, and it started with a pretty shitty present 30 years ago, most Estonians look to the future when they want to feel good. And they also realize that the future is in their hands. So you find a lot of people with entrepreneurial drive who want to do things. Like every second person has a company registered. Running a company is really easy. Tallinn is really nice because it's a European capital, but it's also a village. So you see the same faces over and over again. It's really easy to get to know people through like all layers of society. So it's not for everyone because, the summers are crispy, cold, but and winters are long and dark. But I find something positive in all of these things. So it's a bad place to visit. If you just want to see sights for like 2 or 3 days, don't go to Estonia. It's not worth it. But if you actually want to do things like any kind of project, companies, whatever, meeting entrepreneurs, go to Estonia and stay there for a month or 2. How have you come up with the courage to take the first step towards Estonian people? I went through a really bad breakup in 2019, and then I realized, I'm 29 and I don't have any friends left. I also don't know how to make friends. So I set myself a challenge to talk to one stranger every day until I feel like I know how this works and I don't have to think about it anymore. And then I talked to about 100 people and learned. I set the bar really low. That was the important thing because I had to do it every day. And then your brain, your brain's really good at convincing you of not doing things. And so I had to set the bar really low. I can always say hello to a stranger, right? Most terrifying thing. Saying hello without knowing what to say next. Really, that's really tough. But it motivated me to come up with actually interesting questions. So I started asking random questions. That actually got really interesting results. So my favorite question, you can take that one with you and maybe try it out here in Prague, is if you were the mayor of Prague or God or whatever, what would you change about the city? Like if you have completely free hands. I like this question because the answer is always personal, but it's not too revealing. Like you see what's important to a person, but you're not like too nosy and get too many details about their private lives. And then from there, usually they mention something that you can build on and have a really interesting conversation going. And yeah, Estonians are great for this kind of thing. Do you understand Suomi sometimes a little? I can read it more less than more, but Estonian vocabulary helps for sure. Who asked this? Because this person must have been in Estonia. Yeah, okay. Have you been to Estonia? Nice. And you've played disc golf? Okay, it's super popular in Estonia. I don't know why. I've played it a few times. I'm really bad at it, but it's a good excuse to go to the forest to do something active there. Nice. That's it with the Slido questions. Any other questions before we close this? No? Well, thank you for your time.